Okay, so you're ready to scale your agency, but those revenue plateaus, ugh, they can feel like you're pushing a giant boulder uphill. Am I right? You want to break through and grow, but
Yep.
it's not just about chasing bigger numbers, is it?
You hit the nail on the head. It's about building something sustainable, something that doesn't require you to be glued to your laptop 24/7. And you know what's interesting? This marketing expert named Ed, he gets this completely. His approach really resonated with me, especially his 4-phase framework for agency growth.
4 phases.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm listening. What's step one on this journey to agency domination?
The first phase is where Ed sees agencies getting tripped up, and honestly, I've seen it too. He calls it building your armor. It's like laying a super solid foundation before you even think about scaling.
Makes sense. You can't build a skyscraper on shaky ground. But what does building your armor actually mean? Like, how do you do it?
It's about not falling into the trap of trying to be everything to everyone. Ed's pretty straight talking about this, actually. He says too many agencies try to be the Swiss Army knife of marketing when what clients really want are specialized tools. You can't be the master of everything, right? But you can be the absolute best at one specific thing.
Niching down.
Yeah.
Got it. But then you've found your niche. So how do you actually start attracting clients, especially when you're just starting out?
Ed's advice here is surprisingly simple. He says, forget the fancy website, forget the complicated marketing funnels, at least for now. Just focus on creating a clear and compelling offer. And find a way to prove it works. Case studies, testimonials, even hard data if you've got it.
So it's about validating your idea in the real world, like proving that your concept actually holds water. But how do you get that proof?
This is where Ed's advice might make some people a little uncomfortable. He literally uses the phrase kicking down doors to describe how to land those first clients. Basically, don't be afraid to reach out directly to people who fit your niche, even if it feels a little awkward or salesy at first.
I'm sensing a theme here. Like Ed's seen too many agencies get stuck in this phase because they were too hesitant to just go for it.
Exactly. He's totally speaking from experience when he says that once you have that validation, once you can point to tangible results, that's when you can start scaling. It's like those early wins give you the confidence and the case studies to attract bigger and better clients.
So you're saying those first few clients aren't just about revenue. They're about proving your model works.
Yeah.
They're like the foundation of your agency's success story.
Exactly. They're like your first investors. They're taking a chance on you, and their success stories become the fuel that propels you to that next level. And once you hit that next level, you enter what Ed calls the work versus money phase.
Okay, now this is getting really interesting. Tell me more about this work versus money stage.
So picture this. You're starting to see some consistency in your agency. Maybe you're bringing in 10 to 20K per month, and you're finally starting to feel that momentum build. But this is also where a lot of founders hit a wall. And it's a wall built entirely of their own hard work.
Oh, I know that wall all too well. It's so tempting to just put your head down and grind, but it's exhausting and definitely not sustainable if you're trying to build something that lasts.
And that's exactly Ed's point. He says the biggest risk at this stage is burning yourself out. It's tempting to think, if I just work a little harder, I can push through this. But Ed argues that's a recipe for disaster.
It's like that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. If you're always the hardest worker in your business, you haven't built a business. You've built yourself a very demanding job.
A very demanding and ultimately limiting job. Ed suggests that you need to start separating the doing of the work from the getting of the work. Basically, start thinking about how you can step back from those day-to-day operations and focus on the bigger picture.
Easier said than done, right? So how do you actually make that shift? Where do you even begin?
Ed's advice here is all about building a machine, a system that can eventually run without you constantly needing to be hands-on. But obviously, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are well-oiled agency machines. He recommends starting small by bringing on a freelancer.
Okay, so instead of trying to clone yourself overnight, you're bringing in some reinforcements. What kind of tasks should you delegate to a freelancer first?
Ed suggests starting with someone who can take on some of the client work, the actual execution of your services. This frees you up to focus on landing more clients and refining your sales process, those higher level activities that really move the needle.
It's like you're building an army of skilled freelancers.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure you're not constantly having to train new recruits?
That's where Ed's advice gets really interesting. He emphasizes learning from whoever you outsource to. Create templates, document processes, essentially capturing their knowledge so you could, in theory, replicate those tasks in-house if you needed to.
So it's not just about getting the work done. It's about systematizing the how behind the work. Almost like you're building a library of knowledge that your agency can tap into.
Exactly. And this is going to be key for the next phase of Ed's framework, but I think we've covered a lot of ground already. Maybe this is a good place to pause and let all of this sink in for a bit.
I agree. Building your armor, landing those first clients, and then starting to build that operational muscle, that's a lot to unpack. All right, ready to jump back in?
Let's do it. We left off talking about building those operational systems, bringing on some help, and really starting to create a well-oiled machine. So what happens once you've laid that foundation?
Yeah, what's next? What does growth look like once you're not just scrambling to stay afloat?
This is where things get really interesting. Ed calls phase 3 mastery and retention. You've built your armor, you're starting to see some consistent income, but now it's about going deeper, both in terms of your expertise and your relationships with clients.
Okay, mastery and retention. Those are two words any agency owner loves to hear. But how do you actually make that happen?
It all starts with a mindset shift, moving from reactive to proactive. In the earlier phases, you're often just trying to keep up, right? Fulfilling client requests as they come in, putting out fires.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's like you're constantly on defense, just trying to stay ahead of the game.
Exactly. But in this phase, Ed says you start to move beyond just delivering on orders, and you step into the role of a trusted advisor.
So instead of just being an order taker, you're becoming a strategic partner, anticipating your clients' needs before they even realize they have them.
Right. And this is where that niche focus from phase 1 becomes your superpower. Remember how we talked about being the best at one thing?
Absolutely. It's all starting to click now.
The longer you work with clients in a specific niche, the deeper your understanding of their industry becomes. You start to see patterns, you anticipate challenges, and you can offer solutions that a generalist marketer wouldn't even know existed.
It's like that whole 10,000-hour rule, but for your niche. The more time you spend in that world, the more you become the go-to expert.
Exactly. And that expertise translates to better results for your clients, which of course does wonders for client retention.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Happy clients stick around.
Yeah.
But beyond happy clients, how does this mastery actually translate to growth in your business?
It creates a really amazing upward spiral. When you have high client retention, you spend less time chasing new business and more time going deep with the clients you already have.
Which means you can charge more because you're not just selling a service anymore. You're selling specialized knowledge.
Exactly. You're selling your deep understanding of their specific market. And that higher pricing power, combined with the predictable income that comes from having long-term clients, gives you the financial stability to make bolder moves. You're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving.
This is where you start to feel like you're building something sustainable, something that can really scale. Which brings us to the final phase of Ed's framework. Scaling up. What does scaling look like in this context?
By this point, Ed says you're probably generating a healthy 40 to 50K or more per month. Your agency's running smoothly, the work is high quality, and you finally have the bandwidth to focus on big picture growth.
It's like the dream, right? Being able to step back and think strategically about the future instead of always being stuck in the day-to-day.
Exactly. And Ed argues that in this phase, your primary focus should be on systematizing and scaling 2 key areas: sales and marketing.
Okay, let's unpack those.
Yeah.
What does Ed recommend when it comes to systematizing sales?
He actually gives some pretty unconventional advice here. He talks about trying to clone yourself. Now, before you go out and search for a cloning device, what he means is you need to bring on a dedicated salesperson.
Ah, okay. So instead of just hiring any salesperson, you're strategically bringing someone on board to learn your unique process. Like you're creating a mini-me, but for sales.
Precisely. He emphasizes that this isn't about just throwing them in the deep end. You need to be actively involved in their training, sharing your process, reviewing their calls, giving them feedback. Essentially, you're replicating your sales DNA.
So you're scaling your expertise, not just adding another warm body to make calls.
Yeah.
I love it. But what about marketing? How does that change in this final stage?
Ed says that marketing in this phase should feel very different from those scrappy tactics you might have relied on in the early days. Remember kicking down doors.
How could I forget? Ed's a big believer in being proactive.
Right. But he's not suggesting you go full-on marketing ninja. His point is that now, with a dedicated salesperson handling client acquisition, you have the space to think bigger about your marketing.
So instead of just chasing down every lead, you can focus on crafting a powerful brand message, exploring new marketing channels, maybe even testing out some bolder offers.
Exactly. You're playing a different game now. It's less about hustling for every single client and more about attracting the right clients, those who are aligned with your values and who are excited to pay a premium for your expertise.
This is where you can really start to refine your ideal client profile, right?
Absolutely. You're no longer a small fish in a big pond. You're creating your own ecosystem. And Ed actually brings up something really interesting here that connects back to our earlier conversation about niching down.
Ooh, do tell, I'm all ears.
Okay.
You mentioned something about niching down, connecting to this idea of scaling up.
Right. So Ed's big idea here, and this might surprise you, is that you can achieve incredible success, even hit that coveted 7-figure mark without ever straying from your niche.
Wait, so you're telling me I don't need to become some kind of marketing octopus juggling a million different services to build a thriving agency?
That's exactly what he's saying. In fact, he argues that staying laser focused on your niche actually gives you a bigger advantage in the long run.
Okay, now my mind is officially blown. How does that work? Wouldn't offering more services naturally attract more clients?
It might seem counterintuitive, but by becoming the go-to expert in your niche, you become a scarce and valuable commodity. You can charge premium prices because you're not just selling a service, you're selling specialized knowledge that's hard to find.
So it's like that old saying, become irreplaceable by becoming indispensable. But instead of being indispensable to one client, you're indispensable to an entire industry.
Exactly. And because you're so specialized, you can attract those high-value clients who are willing to pay a premium for your expertise.
It's about quality over quantity, both in terms of the clients you work with and the services you offer.
You got it. And this goes back to Ed's overall philosophy, which I think is really refreshing. It's not about grinding yourself down or trying to be all things to all people. It's about making smart choices, focusing on your strengths, and building an agency that reflects your unique expertise and values.
So if I had to sum up Ed's framework, it's basically about niching down, systematizing your processes, and then scaling those systems in a strategic way. Did I miss anything?
I think you nailed it.
Wow.
You've really grasped the key concepts here.
Well, I have to give you credit. You walked us through this whole deep dive. Ed's insights are game changers. They're definitely going to change how I approach building my agency.
I'm so glad to hear that. And you know what? If there's one more piece of wisdom I can offer from Ed, it's this. Don't be afraid to say no.
Say no to clients.
Yes. Especially to clients who aren't the right fit. Remember, at this stage, it's about building that ecosystem we talked about. And sometimes that means turning down opportunities that would just distract you from your main goal.
Because focus is everything, right? It's like saying no to the good so you can say yes to the great.
Now you're getting it.
Ah.
And that's how you build a truly great agency, one that doesn't just compete in the market, but actually redefines it.
I love that. So to wrap things up for our listeners today, Ed mentioned that focusing on a single niche can take you all the way to 7 figures and beyond. So here's something to think about. What are some unexpected niches out there? Maybe ones that don't even exist yet. What unique skills or passions do you have that could be turned into a wildly successful agency? That's something to chew on. Until next time, happy scaling.